many of you have ever seen or read Harry Potter before? Okay, so as you probably know, before Harry found out he was a wizard, he had these magical powers, and he would act different than everybody else, and he wondered why. And then when he found out he was a wizard, the pieces kind of came together, and he realized why he acted different. So similar to this, a man named James Williams with high-functioning autism goes around the world and speaks to everybody about his issue he faces. And before he found out he had autism, he would question, why am I acting and speaking different than everybody else, and just why do I seem to be a little bit off? So when he found out he had autism, similar to Harry, he realized he put pieces together and kind of just understood why he was a little bit different. So, as you probably know, autism spectrum disorder is a neurological disorder that affects speech and motor development. So the diagnosis is typically around the age of 2 when the child is showing most profound speech and motor movements. And most symptoms are most profound during childhood, and then they kind of seem to die off when a person gets older and grows, as I kind of analyzed in some of my work. So one of the speech problems that's really common in those with autism is that they have a difficult time expanding their vocabulary. So the way teachers help students with this issue is they will usually give them these pictures with words with them, and what they do is they have the images so that the child is able to develop their thoughts into clear sentences that make sense rather than being jumbled thoughts. So some of the studies that I looked at in my research were narrative studies. So what they did was they typically developed students versus those with autism, and they would give them these picture books, as you can see on the right. They would have little to no words in them, and they have the child write the story, basically, based off the pictures and words they see. And then the results of this, they typically found vague pronoun references. So like in the pictures before, you could see that they would refer to the dog or the apples as it rather than saying like a name or saying like the apple or the fruit. And one of my research studies that I looked at was Rebecca Bainey, Keely Harper-Hill, and Wendy Arnott at the University of Queensland's School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences. So they looked at this study, and they looked at the complex sentence types, and as you can see in the dark gray, that's the typically developed, and they excelled in almost every category of these complex sentences, so you can just see some of the delays that those with autism might face. So one of my corpus analysis was a blog by a woman named Jess, and she had a conversation with her daughter Brooke. So this is the first half of the conversation. As you can see, it's very short and simple, and in all of Brooke's responses, she didn't really have much depth to what she was saying. And you can see that at first Jess asks what makes her happy, and later on in the conversation she responded with the word happy, and you can see that she kind of just circled the conversation back, which could be an indication that Brooke has a difficult time when it comes to expanding her vocabulary and being able to express her thoughts better. And you can also see that she has a difficult time saying a lot of different words to express how she actually feels. And then this is the second half of the conversation. So she was talking about her friends, and Brooke's response is she really didn't say much about how she felt when she was with them. She just kind of expressed that she was with them, which makes it kind of difficult to understand how she feels. And also the mother would ask your friends, and she would just simply refer with them rather than saying her friends or her friends' names. So you can tell there might be some trouble with her being able to express how she feels. So another one of my research studies was done by Jessica Day-Villiers from the Department of English at the University of British Columbia. So what she did in her study was she had a conversation with a boy, and she found that he had some really just vague and difficult times saying what he meant, and it was just really difficult to understand what he meant. And so this is kind of true in my studies too, with the vagueness and just the jumbled kind of sentences. So it was kind of difficult for me to study written work of children. So what I did instead was I looked at adults, and like I said earlier, in adults it seemed like the symptoms were less common, so I found rather than vague pronoun use, it was just more of a vagueness in general. So my first example was a musician named Najat Tadal, and this was just in a blog, and she has a form of autism called Asperger's, and she was describing how she felt about this condition, and the first thing she said was the things. So starting off this, the reader would kind of expect to have like a really vivid image of what she meant when she said the things. But then she kind of goes on and doesn't really give much detail of what she meant. She just kind of said so fun and so awesome. So it was kind of difficult to see what she felt and what she meant by this. And then my second example is the blogger C.S. Wyatt, and this was one of the stories on the blog, and it was called My Jeep Friend. So in this part that I took from this, you can see that they never actually express the word Jeep. They rather use it to describe the Jeep. So it can kind of become difficult in the story to understand what they mean by that. Although it says it in the title, it might just be difficult when you're reading the story and following along with it. And additionally, the word we is on here too, and they never state who we is, so we don't know if it's them and their family or them and their friends. So it just kind of becomes difficult for us to understand exactly what they're trying to say. So the purpose of studying autism and grammar issues is to be able to help and appreciate their issues that they face every day. So things we can do to help children is by using these images like you saw earlier, and just putting words together, and using picture books and just helping them be able to formulate their thoughts into complete and clear things. And we also need to make sure we are always patient with those with autism, because they're just like everybody else and they deserve the same care and respect as everybody.